All right, let's get started and get into it because I know Patricia has a lot to share with us. So you are here. I'm Alexa Bigworth, host of the Women in Publishing Summit. You may have come in from our Write, Publish, Sell side as well, or any of the marketing that we're doing around that. So we welcome you. This is part of our Women in Publishing Summit sponsor webinar series. So each month, sometimes a couple times a month, we bring in all of our sponsors from our conference because we feel it's really important for you to get an extra deep dive look at their areas of expertise, their companies, and what they're doing. One of the things that's very important to me as a publishing consultant and working with authors and the host of the conference is to make sure that people know what resources are out there and available to them, learn about those companies, and are able to make better educated decisions about who to work with, where to spend your budget, and all of those things. So Patricia Marshall is here with us from Luminare Press, and she's going to tell you all about them, I'm sure, and also provide information on how you can connect with Patricia at the end if you feel like Luminare might be a good fit for you as an author. And beyond that, thank you again so much, Patricia, for the support that you provide to our community and to our conference. And we couldn't make this event happen without the support of our sponsors. So thank you so much for being a part of our community and for supporting this event. And I'm going to pass the reins to you now.
Thank you. And thank you, Alexa, and the entire Women in Publishing community. I've really enjoyed being a part of this group, and I really appreciate that all of you are here today. So thanks for coming to this self-publishing framework. I started Luminary Press in 2010 with the goal of helping authors publish high-quality books. Now, back then, self-publishing and print-on-demand printing were relatively new. And I was seeing a lot of very poorly produced books. They had slapdash covers and messy interiors. They just weren't sort of up to the standard of what you would expect in a book. At that same time, people in my writing circle were talking about self-publishing as a viable option. But when they talked about it, they were putting it in terms of it being a much easier option. They would say things like, well, I've just decided to stop looking for an agent and self-publish my book, like it was a Saturday afternoon craft project or something. What those writers, and a lot of writers I've talked to since, really don't understand is that publishing is a complex task that no one is going to pick up in a weekend or even a month or two. Publishing is a very different discipline from writing. And just as there are writers who are able to spend their whole careers creating content, there are publishers who spend their whole careers in the book industry. These are people who understand the conventions and standards of the industry and really are responsible for the fact that we've had so many great books to read over the years. For most of the 20th century, publishing and writing existed as two separate disciplines. The spheres were tangential, but they were really separate. You, as a writer, could turn your work over to a team that would polish up your prose, make a great cover for your book, and get it into the hands of eager readers. But most of you are here today because you understand that that's no longer the case. Traditional publishers are market driven and they're unlikely to take a chance on a relatively new author with a smaller, insignificant platform. They're looking for blockbuster writers or celebrities like Michelle Obama or Prince Harry, whose portraits on the front of a book will sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Because of that, if you, as a talented but relatively unknown writer, want to publish a book, it is very likely that you're going to have to do it yourself. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. If there's one thing I want you to take home today, it's that independent publishing is not a lesser path. It's a very reasonable response to a rapidly changing industry. There are a lot of authors out there who are creating fantastic books that are finding their audience and earning decent royalties. Independent publishing offers tremendous advantages. No matter what type of book you've published, it allows you to have more control over the process, to retain a greater share of the royalties, and often to work on a shortened timeline. The even better news in 2024 is that independent publishing doesn't mean you have to do everything on your own. There are authors who still take that path, but if you want your book to have a chance on the market, it needs to be in line with other books of its type. So even though you don't have to go it alone, you have to understand what goes into making a book for the market. In this seminar, I'm going to outline 3 major areas of publishing. Now, this is something I could talk about for hours, probably days, but we don't have that much time. So I'm going to try and give you a high-level overview with some suggestions. As Alexa said, we'll have time for a Q&A in the end, and you can put questions in there. I also, at the top of the chat on the side, I put my email address. It's Patricia at Luminare Press. So if there are any questions we don't get to, or if you want me to clarify anything, feel free to contact me after the webinar. I'm also going to put a link to Luminare Press services. We do everything from editing to a la carte design to full publishing packages, but I'm not really going to be talking about the specifics of our company. If you want more information, you can reach out for me. You can make a free, schedule a free consultation, and I'll help you in any way I can. So at this point, I'm going to switch to screen sharing, and we can begin to talk about how you're going to make a successful book. And here we go. Okay, Alexa, can you tell me, did that work?
Yes, ma'am. I can see it perfectly.
Okay, and it's not my notes page, right?
Oh, we can see full screen.
Okay, so I want to start by talking about what we mean when we say publishing. The basic process is the same, whether you're going to self-publish or whether your book is traditionally published. You take a manuscript, you create a book from it, and you make it available for sale. The difference between traditional and self-publishing, aside from who pays for what and how royalties might be split, really lies in who's doing the tasks that are necessary to go from your manuscript to a book that's available for sale on the market. It's either going to be you or the publishing house. If you're traditionally published, it's going to be the publishing house. But if you're independently publishing, it's going to be you. And that means the tasks that a publisher usually does, the things they attend to, are going to fall on you. So while you should be able to work on a shorter timeline, it's not because you're going to take shortcuts. It's because you're working on one book instead of many. So let's take a look at the framework and how these 3 areas come together. Once the book is written, in my opinion, there are 3 major components to the process. There's the polish part, the design part, and the publishing part. What I'm suggesting today is that when you break your publishing down into these 3 stages and you understand what each entails, it will help you stay on track to make a book, because this process can be really overwhelming. So you need to have a way to think about it and a way to approach it that works for you. The polish or editing is the step of paying attention to the content or the text. It's the part of the process that's looking at anything from like big picture editing to proofreading. The design is the part that focuses on turning your manuscript into a product. It includes creating a compelling cover and getting your interior laid out and readable. And the publishing part focuses on making the product discoverable and available. It's getting your book set up so that it can be printed and sold to readers, both online and in bookstores. So let's look at each of these and see what happens if you shortcut any of them. So let's say you've edited your book, you've done a great job on it from content editing to copy editing, and you've made a great design. You have a very fantastic cover and you're ready to go, but you neglect the publishing part. If you do that, if you don't set up your distribution correctly, retailers and booksellers won't be able to find your book. And if they can't find your book, they can't buy it. Now, again, let's say you've attended to the editing stuff, but you've set up your distribution correctly. But you've neglected the design part. You've gotten a canvas cover. It's, you haven't really paid attention to the interior. If you do this, your book is really going to have negligible value to people in the book industry. And when I talk about people in the book industry, I'm talking about booksellers, reviewers, bloggers, anybody who is like going to help you promote and sell your book. The other thing that's going to happen is that readers are less likely to buy it if they do find it, because they understand that something's off or it's just not that appealing. Okay, and if you neglect editing, and please don't do that. If your book is riddled with grammar errors, it's illogically constructed, again, book professionals are really going to panic. They're not going to pay attention to it. And you run the risk of negative reviews from readers, which really can kill your book sales online. But if you pay attention to all three of these, at the intersection sits your fantastically edited, beautifully designed, and well-produced book that's available for sale. So at this point, I'm going to go into each of these spheres in a little more detail, and we will start with the polish part. Polishing editing is often a tedious step, but the more polished and professional your manuscript is, the more likely it's going to be well received by readers and book world people in general. You absolutely do not want to go to the time and trouble of producing a book that garners negative reviews for things that could have easily been fixed. Authors often think of editing as like one round of reviews or one step, but it's an expansive term that includes a lot of different approaches to the manuscript. Some people use the term to talk about like big picture content editing, but it can also include line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. So you're taking this on yourself. You need to understand what your manuscript needs. And you also need to understand that no matter how great a writer you are, the more sets of eyes on your book, the better off it's going to be. So let's go over some types of editing. Ideally, by the time you're ready to sort of move into book production, the manuscript has gone through numerous drafts and rewrites, and the work is ready to present to the reader. A lot of writers work informally with writing groups or beta readers, both on structure and style as they're writing the manuscript. But if you haven't gone through that process, you should consider a developmental or a content editor. It is a rare writer, like unicorn rare, who can polish or can publish a first draft successfully. Revisions of multiple drafts are a widely acknowledged part of the writing process, and as painful as that process can be, it is really worth going through. Now, the next level of editing could be a line edit. It may be beneficial, but it really depends on how much the manuscript has been reworked during the developmental editing process. A line edit will help with polishing structure, with organization and content. It may suggest rewriting to improve flow and improve readability. It will generally call out issues of concern with the manuscript. The stage that a lot of people think about, or they think their manuscript needs at the minimum, is a copy edit. It's the step where the editor is paying attention to the minutia of the text, the misplaced comma, the confusion between there and there. They are also making sure there is consistency with things like spelling out numbers in your chapter titles, with your characters, so that they don't have blue eyes on page 4 and brown eyes on page 44. They're looking for proper nouns and making sure there's consistency in spelling. And they're just generally going through the text without necessarily examining the big picture or the structure. Now, all of these stages happen before your book goes to a layout. These happen in the manuscript stage. But once your book has been formatted correctly, it's really advisable to get a proofread, which is a final check before your book goes to print. And you can remember this because when you talk about a proof copy of the book, it actually could be a physical copy of the book. A lot of people will do it online, but it happens after the book is formatted. And the proofreader is going to check for all the things the copy editor checked for, plus they're going to review the layout for you and make sure, the front banner is in the right order and things like that. So once you understand what type of editing your manuscript needs, you need to determine how you're going to get it done. We talked about content or developmental editing being done by peer groups, which is really not uncommon. If you haven't been through that process, you can engage a content or developmental editor if that's what your book needs. But be sure you work with an editor who understands that that's what you're asking them for. Now, when we get to the copy and line edit stage, some writers use online tools. Most text programs have a spelling and grammar functions, including Word. You can turn on a grammar function in Word if you go to Tools. And there are more extensive programs like Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid that can help you spot errors. I think these are subscription programs, so you can sign up for them for a relatively low cost. And at the minimum, if you can't hire a copy editor, you really need to put your manuscript through one of these programs. We haven't found them to be 100% reliable, but they are really better than nothing. This is also a place where, your editor friends might come in handy, but be sure if you are asking a friend to edit your manuscript, again, that you're clear about what you want them to be looking for. There's nothing worse than sending somebody something for a copy edit and have them try and rewrite your book for you. But I also want to say, I think at least for a copy edit, it is really an important place to hire a professional editor if you can. Someone who will both copy edit your book and proofread it after the layout. It's really a great option. So if you work with a professional editor, you need to remember that the title editor has no formal qualifications required. Anybody can really hang out their shingle and say, I'm an editor. They have an English degree or whatever. So if you're going to work with someone, you want to make sure that the person you're working with is legit. You want to engage someone with a background in the type of editing you're looking for, and you want them to provide you with references and a sample of their work. So you want to check their background. You want to make sure that they're doing, what you need them to do. I strongly advise asking for a sample edit. And if you don't like the edit, or there are things that confuse you or concern you, talk to the editor at that stage. Don't just hand over your manuscript and expect them to do what you think you asked them to do, because it's a really subjective process. So you want to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. And a sample edit should be about 5 pages or so. You also want to agree on an editing format. You want to know if they're going to use track changes in Word, markup with a red pen, how these edits are going to be implemented, and you want to make sure that you're able to review them, particularly if they're using track changes or another online program. You want to be able to review them before you agree with them all. Lastly, you want to agree on a style guide. Now, most novels use the Chicago Manual of Style as a guide, but your editor should also create a style sheet that is specific to your book. These are things that call out proper noun spelling, unusual conventions you use, and they really help. If an editor does this, it really helps when you're going through a proofread. If you talk to an editor who is not familiar with either the Chicago Manual of Style or a style sheet, I would consider that a little bit of a red flag. It's not necessarily a reason to dismiss them, but I would think about that, because these are two common things that professional editors are aware of. Now, once your book is edited, you are now ready to move into the design phase. Creating a cover and interior for your book is possibly the most misunderstood part of book making. You're going to package your writing into a product. This is the stage when you're turning your manuscript into a book, and you're making it into a readable form that your readers can buy. To print a book, to make a print-on-demand book, whether it's a multiple copy run or print on demand, you have to have 2 book files. The first is the cover file, and you can see this file here. I think this is something we downloaded from Ingram Spark. This is a file that was designed for a hardback. You can see the book flaps on either side. This is not a design template. This is a printing template. So this is telling you how you're going to position your art and your text on there so that it is able to be printed. It's this one long file is going to be the output. The interior is going to be single paged. It's going to be a PDF, and it's going to include everything, all your front and back matter, your title page, any bibliography, biography information, anything that goes between the covers of the book. Each of these files has to be designed to conform to the standards of the industry and to meet the printer's specifications. And understanding what goes into making these, the cover and interior, and how to go about getting print ready files is really a key to successful self-publishing. All right, we're going to talk about the cover, which is probably one of my favorite topics of all time. A lot of times when I'm talking to prospective clients, they say things like, well, I already have the cover. My friend has a photograph, or I have this piece of art, so we don't need to worry about the cover. And I love hearing that. I love having a starting point for the cover because it really puts me in tune with what the author wants. But an image or a piece of art is not a cover. And a cover is not a picture with the title of the book and the author name on it either. Still not a cover. A cover is, as I mentioned before, one long file that includes the front, the spine, and the back. This is what's going to go to the printer. It's going to be a PDF, and it's going to be printed as one sheet on a different type of stock that's wrapped around your book block. When most authors think about the cover, though, they think about the front, and rightly so, because this is really this is how readers are going to be introduced to your book. You want it to look good. You want it to look legible, even at a little tiny thumbnail size, because that's how people are going to see it. And you really want to get it right. Now, in this example, you can see that there are a lot of things going on. The obvious elements, and the one most people think or understand need to be included, are the title and the author name. In this case, the reader also had a subtitle, and because we thought the title and the subtitle sort of read a little bit like a memoir, we put a novel on here too. You can see that up here in this little leaf. So we took the image, put the text over it, and made it readable and appealing, I think. I really like this cover. The spine, the front text is usually repeated on the spine. You can have the subtitle on there. In this case, we didn't really think we had room for it, but you want to have the book title, you want to have the author name, and you want to have the publisher imprint, if you have one, down on the bottom. The back cover has a lot of latitude. It usually contains, at the minimum, a book description, but you have to leave room for the barcodes. You can see that here. Again, we have the publisher imprint and website. You have a retail price over here, and the author wanted to put their website on there too. In this case, she has a book description here, and she chose to use the space for a couple blurbs about a previous book she had written. She also put a book excerpt here, which is another possibility. A lot of authors will put their author photo and bio on the back, but she chose to put that on the inside back page so that she had room on here for more. And you can also put some of these blurbs on the front cover, but I think in this case, we felt like we didn't have enough room for them. So all of these surfaces, the front, the back, and the spine, need to work together. And that's the job of a designer, to create a cover where all the parts are cohesive. Front image selection, readability, and general appeal are all part of that. It's also the designer's job to make sure the cover meets the specifications of the printer. The spine width needs to be adjusted to the page count of the book. And in this example, these lines on here are just guidelines. They won't be exported when we send it to the printer. But the spine needs to be a specific width. And up here, if you can see these very faint white lines, this is the bleed area, which you have to include for a print-on-demand book, actually for any printed material. If your image extends to the end, you have to extend it a little beyond that. If you try and upload a cover without this, you are just going to run into a ton of trouble with it. So having said all that about the cover, let's move on to the interior of the book. This, to me, is the heart and soul of the book, because this is the work that we do for the reader. We want the pages to be designed to be readable, to be like a great reading experience for someone. So it means readability, but it also suggests a great layout and appropriate guidelines for the readers. Things like the table of contents, the section and chapter titles, the headers and footers, the pagination, all of these things help anchor your reader in the text, and you don't want to neglect them or not understand how they work, because you want your story to be enhanced by an exceptional layout. If you're writing nonfiction, you want your words and emphasis to be clear with consistent use of images, subheads, maybe footheads, bibliographies, and more. Now, I'm going to point out here that it is essential that the book have a readable font. And I know that seems obvious, but this is a place where a lot of authors who are doing their own work fall short. They use Times New Roman, which is a newspaper font and not appropriate for a book, or even worse, I've seen things printed like in Comic Sans. Those things are hard to read and should be avoided. You don't want the text to be small and crowded. And you want to make sure that the book is paginated correctly with all the front and back matter in place. The text should be even on both sides, so you can see that there are no ragged right margins. The gutter or spine side has a slightly larger margin to account for the room that's going to be taken up with the binding. But your margins have to have enough room around them. Blank pages should not have headers or footers or page numbers on them, and most front and back matter do not have that either. Now, just in case I wasn't clear on that, I want to show you the difference between a layout that somebody did in Word and a professional layout. So I'm going to make the poor layout bigger so I can point some things out to you. First of all, you'll notice that this chapter title is the same font. It's just sized up a little bit and doesn't really have any style to it. Nor does the first paragraph. The first paragraph will usually have a drop cap or a special line style for the first line. This is just indented as the rest of the text, and this indent is really too big. It's not sort of the normal size for that. This has, of course, the ragged right margins that I mentioned. This is how we usually write in Word, but it's not appropriate for a book. One of the other things this has is uneven page length, which is like a little pet peeve of mine. This line should have just been moved to the next page, or the top of this one moved down. But the biggest problem with this, the layout aside, is the pagination. In Word, you have to start the odd numbers on the right side of the book. If you upload a file, Word wants to start it on the left side if you're doing a spread. If you upload a file that's paginated like this, it's going to be rejected by the printers. So just be careful and pay attention to the pagination. It's a little thing, but these are the things that make a lot of difference. So I also want to note that we often show interiors in spreads, a two-page view, but when you export them, it's a single page that's going to be printed front to back. So that's something to remember. And the export, like the cover, is a PDF. Print on demand prints from PDFs. Okay. Creating these two files is probably the most time-consuming and potentially costly part of the process, aside from the writing and editing. It's an excellent place to hire experts, but if you can't do that, you have some options. The printers, both Ingram Spark and KDP, and I'm going to talk about them in the next segment, have templates available that you can download, so you at least have the guidelines for templates. There are templates online that you can use, cover creation templates through Canva or some other places that you can use to make covers. But be careful if you do this, and be aware of the fact that you're running the risk of using a template or something that a lot of other authors have used. If you do hire a designer, make sure that they have a background in book cover design. Just because they've gone to art school, it doesn't mean they know anything about book covers. So make sure you are hiring somebody who has a track record with book covers and that they understand how to set up the files to meet the specifications of the printer. For the interior, you have a few more options, but I really don't advise using Word. It's really hard to get it right. You can do it, but it's really hard to get it right, and it just doesn't handle text very elegantly. There are online programs that I think do a decent job with interior layout, including Vellum, Scrivener, Atticus. You can look into those. Again, I think they're subscription programs. There's going to be a learning curve with them, but at least they were set up to create books. So they should be a reasonable option. Most professional designers, though, use InDesign, and that is really the gold standard for book design. Your text is going to come out beautifully if it's in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, and you're just going to have a great readable book. I want to caution you against trying to learn InDesign on your own for the purposes of laying out a book. It's a deep program with a steep learning curve. And even though you can get a free trial for, I think, a month and then have a subscription for a couple months, I think you're going to be really unhappy with the process, because unless you want a side gig as a designer, the amount of things you have to learn is staggering to get a well laid out book. With that, we are going to move into the publishing section. This is the final step. And this is the step that most writers think of when they think of publishing as something they can do for free. It costs nothing to list your book on Amazon, and Ingram Spark, I think, charges $12 a year, so a really nominal fee to get your book out there. But that doesn't mean that publishing happens with the click of a button. You have to set up your book correctly and choose the correct distribution options. You have to understand how ISBNs work and select the right path for you on that. You have to set a retail price, and you have to set the appropriate sales discount. There are two major companies in the United States that do print-on-demand printing and distribution. And most writers who are self-publishing, including you if that's the path you're going, are going to use one of these two. The first is Kindle Direct Publishing, or KDP, which is associated with Amazon. The second is Ingram Spark, which is associated with Ingram Content Group. There's a lot of argument about which is better, but we really recommend that you set up your book using both of them. KDP will make your book directly available to readers through Amazon. So it's a direct to retail program, and that has some advantages to you. Ingram Spark is a distributor who will offer your book for wide distribution through bookstores and other online retailers, and then to the readers. And I want to note that Ingram gives you more control over sort of how your book is distributed. KDP can distribute through Ingram Content Group. If you select expanded distribution through KDP, which a lot of authors are tempted to do, it will make your book available the same way Ingram Spark does, but it adds an unnecessary layer, and it's really not doing your book any favors. So even though it's a little trouble, you should try to set up your book with both of these companies. They both have online tutorials and great information on them. Your ISBN is an International Standard Book Number. And I want to be clear here about what that is. It's not a number that confers any rights to anyone. It is simply a number that is identifying who has published the book, and it is how retailers and booksellers are going to find it. Now, how you get your ISBN really, it makes a difference in how your book is going to be perceived. Both Amazon and Ingram, I think, offer a free ISBN, but I don't recommend that. It will limit your distribution options, and I think you're going to be sorry if you do that. You can purchase your own ISBNs through Bowker's Books in print. If you do this, you're going to be setting up your own publishing company and buying them in blocks of probably 10, although you can buy 1, 10, or 100, I think. And you can also work with a hybrid publisher. Like, for instance, when people work with Luminare Press, we provide an ISBN, and Luminare Press is listed as the publisher on the copyright page of the book. But that, again, confers no rights to the work for us. It is simply saying we published this edition of the book. That's not what people are talking about when they tell you not to get a free ISBN. That is an ISBN that comes as part of a publishing package and identifies your book again, so people can find it and identifies the person who provided the ISBN as the publisher. So I'm going to talk a minute about royalties and retail pricing. Both KDP and Ingram have online calculators that will help you figure out what your pricing is, what your pricing could be, and how that affects your royalties. So in general, this is how it's going to work though. Now, these are numbers that I just sort of use. These are rounded numbers. They're not going to apply to your book, but I can do these in my head. So let's say that you have a 300-page novel and it's priced at $19.95 or $20. From that comes the sales discount. A retailer is going to take between, or a person who's selling your book is going to take between 40 and 55%. In this case, I use the highest number, $11. So from that $20, $11 is subtracted from when the sale is made. Then you have the printing cost of your book. So again, let's just suppose that it's around $5. That is going to be subtracted from what remains after the sales discount, and the balance, $4, is going to be your royalty. A lot of authors think that this, are surprised at this. They think it's a pretty low number, but it's actually very, very typical for books and not a bad royalty to get per book. Now, I've talked about the sales discount, and this is something you really need to think about. This is the discount that is given to people who sell your book. KDP distributes directly to retail, and they have a 40% discount. You have no choice in that. If you sell that $20 book on KDP, they're going to take $8 off the top, then select your sales cost, and then you'll have your royalty. So that is because they are direct to retail. And I should mention that if they offer any discounts or anything, that comes from their $8. So you don't have to worry about the fact that they may have discounted your book. Ingram Spark is a distributor. So they are distributing to retailers, and they have a choice on how you can set your royalty, but 55% is optimal because that gives the bookseller 40%, and then Ingram Spark takes 15% off the top. It's tempting for new authors, especially, to do two things at this point when they start to realize about the royalties. The first is to go as high on the retail price as they can, because your retail price really does affect what your royalty is going to be. But it's a mistake to overprice your book. A 300-page novel is generally going to sell between $14.95 and $19.95, and if you price your book at $24.95, you really risk missing a significant group of readers. The second thing authors are tempted to do is change the discount price through Ingram. I think 35% is as low as you can go, but this will really disincentivize book buyers, whether they're online or booksellers. Booksellers, brick and mortar stores are not going to stock your book. They're even less likely to be willing to special order it. And online retailers may show your book out of stock or with long, long wait periods. So if you can stick with that 55% discount, that is really the smartest thing to do. So this is, I think, right on time. Yes, the end of my part about this. I want to reiterate that if you pay attention to your editing and writing, you make a beautiful book and you set it up correctly for print on demand publishing, it is really going to contribute greatly to your chances of success as a self-publishing author. I also want to note that I'm sure you probably noticed that I haven't specifically talked about marketing your book in this seminar. Marketing is an ongoing feature of an author's life, and the tasks that I've been talking about here are largely one and done. So it's important to remember that without a solid foundation, without a good book to sell, your marketing efforts are going to be far more difficult than you can imagine. Now, it's not to say you shouldn't be thinking about marketing while you're going through these steps. You're going to want to build your email list. You're going to create a marketing plan. But laying this foundation of having a good book is going to really help you launch into success. So with that said, I believe I can stop screen sharing. Oh, wait, one more thing. I just want to remind you that you can get in touch with me after this. Check my email in the chat. check our webpage, www.luminarepress.com. You can set up a free consultation with me, and I'll be glad to talk you through your options. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share now that I've gotten the last slide in. And Alexa, do you want to read the questions, or should I be looking through them?
I could
Sounds
do
like
you.
let me go ahead and do that. Okay. I'm sorry, did you just say you'd do it?
Sure, but go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so there's some criticisms of some of the slides I put up. Fair enough, we may not have copy edited them yet. Shouldn't all the chapters start on the right-hand page? Sometimes, sometimes not. You can find books with either way. I'm not a fan of a blank page in a book, but you can do it. That's sort of a matter of preference. You can create a template in Word that gives you the gutters you need in the interior. That might be, I'm not a Word expert, except for writing. Let's see. For the interior, Garamond Premier Pro is a good choice for fonts. That is absolutely true. It is a great choice. I like Garamond. I like, I'm not going to remember the names now because I've been talking too much, but there are 5 or 6 great font choices for the interior that you should be looking at. Minion Pro, that's another one someone mentioned. Caslin, Bembo, Saban. Why is Times New Roman font inappropriate for fiction? Times New Roman, I think I mentioned this, it's a newspaper font. It was designed to be like crowded to fit in tiny newspaper columns. It's a great font. I write in Times New Roman, but when it's in a book, it makes the book seem a little too crowded and condensed, which doesn't lead to a great reading experience.
Patricia, are you looking
Yes,
at the chat? I can pull up the questions that are actually in the Q&A box. Let's start
sure.
with those.
Sure, you want to start with those?
Yeah. Kim asked, doesn't print on demand make the cost per book more? What is the cost to the writer for the copies of their own book? She's got like 4 questions here, so we'll just
Okay,
start.
I see them too. So print on demand costs more than offset printing. So that, if you want to print 5,000 books, you can probably get your costs down per book. But most authors use print on demand because you don't pay for the printing until the book is sold. That's the demand part of the process. So yes, they cost more. An average novel is going to cost, I think, $4 to $5, maybe closer to 5 these days because the price has gone up a little bit. Um, Most authors who are independently publishing are not going to have a print run unless it's a specialty book. The thing about print runs is that it doesn't put you in the distribution system. The beauty of print on demand is that you can both print your book and get it into the distribution system. And yes, you make it available to bookstores. And if you're creating the book yourself, you can often buy books just for the print cost. For instance, if you work with us, we don't charge anything when you buy books for your own use. You just pay the printing cost of the book. Okay, I hope that helped.
Would you
I'm
like me
looking
to
at the,
read you, or do you want
yeah,
to go?
yeah.
So Kim says, I've been through 20 years of writing, rewriting,
Okay.
peak groups, rewriting, professional editing, got an agent, and after 2.5 years, despite loving my book, he hasn't found a publisher for me. I've told him that if we don't have a traditional publisher by the end of the year, I will self-publish, which I dread. To which there's no question here, but I would like to say, what do you think there's another option, right? We're talking here do you operate as a hybrid press,
Yes,
correct?
we operate as a hybrid and we help people, again, create the books and get them out there, get the books marketed. As I said in the seminar, it's not a bad thing. There are a lot of authors who are doing really, really well with it. But you have to put the work in. You have to sort of take on that role as a publisher and a marketer. If you publish with a small press, you're going to take on the role of marketing anyhow. Um, but but we really try and walk people through the process so that they understand what it is. So I hope that if you're afraid, just call me. We'll talk it through for 15 minutes. I promise you, you will be less afraid at the end. Okay. But I
Yes.
also hope if you want a traditional publisher, I hope you find one.
The beauty of the hybrid press, though, just to spend a moment here, because I think there's a lot of people who don't really understand. Yes, there is a fee for partnership because it's a
Hmm.
higher risk to take on authors that don't have platforms, that don't have an audience built, that don't have the time to invest in doing all the things. Because when you self-publish, you are learning how to be your own publisher. You are learning how to be your own marketer. You're learning all
Hmm.
of these things. And so the door is open to you with a hybrid press that you don't have to learn all of that stuff by yourself. You get included in a
Right.
catalog. Your book is marketed through other avenues. So I want people to know that there is this middle ground. It doesn't have to be traditional or self-publishing, and hybrid is a very great avenue for folks who don't want to self-publish and learn it all on their own.
Right. Very
Okay.
nicely put. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I don't know how much you want to get into formatting and design. This may be one that you can answer quickly. What do you do with a drop cap when the first character is an open?
I usually make the drop cap include the letter, the quotes and the letter. But again, that's sort of a designy thing. If you ask my designers, they would spend an hour telling you about the options. But
I've seen it done both ways. I've seen just the drop cap without an opening quote. I've
mhm.
seen the other. So
Yeah, that's another way to do it. Yeah, that's the fun part.
yes, exactly. From my own research, draft to digital looks interesting. Do you have any thoughts on it? And side note, they're publishing in the UK, if that makes any difference to the answer.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about draft to digital. We have used them and recommended them for ebooks, but I don't know a lot really about their printing capability. So, what I was trying to say in this seminar is, if you are thinking of those three spheres, see how they are approaching each of those and see if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I haven't worked with draft to digital much at all on the print side. Ebook, it's a fine place for
Mhm.
distribution, but I still my preference is still remains Ingram Spark. They are the largest distributor. They just have the most to help authors out there. So if you're looking for distribution globally, especially, they have printers all over the world. So we have
Mhm.
authors in Australia, we have authors in the UK. We can get books printed and shipped at much lower cost as well, because they have those printers right there. They do, own a big part of the marketplace. So draft to digital is fine. I know their reporting is a little bit challenging, and they're growing and improving as a company too. But the big key, I think, for me is the global distribution piece. For those of you overseas, is it going to offer you what you need in terms of accessibility into your marketplaces?
Mhm.
If you're in KU for ebooks but print on demand through Ingram, can your print version be available on Amazon?
I believe they can. Yes. Is that right? Kindle?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh,
We-
Kindle Unlimited. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we publish in
Okay.
both
Mhm.
places. What are the conventions of formatting for nonfiction, indents of paragraphs, first and subsequent, justified, etc.? I don't know if you
That's a whole design question. It's a thing to approach with a designer. But here's the other thing. I always recommend going and looking at books. I mean, go to a bookstore and spend an afternoon in the nonfiction department, or look at nonfiction books you like, because that will give you some guidelines for what you're thinking about. Nonfiction is a little different when it comes to formatting, but the same principles of readability, anchoring the reader in the text, having it be consistent throughout the book apply. It's the same principle as it is with a novel.
Awesome. Okay, we've got some questions on, I don't know, do you want to talk about the cost or process of publishing?
No, Kim, I see your question about the cost, but check in with me by email or schedule a time to talk to me, because I can answer that, with some certainty if we talk for 5 or 10 minutes.
Perfect. Are you familiar with Palmetto Publishing, who will provide all the services from editing to design? There's a ton of different businesses out there.
There's a ton of businesses. There's a couple places I would check. I would check the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is shortened to ALLI. They have a list of a ranking of the best and worst self-publishing companies. And you really want to know that before you go in, because just as there are a lot of great companies like mine who are doing fantastic work for their authors, there are a lot of scams out there. So check that. There's also a site called Writer Beware. Writer
Yes.
Beware, that I think was a sci-fi group that started in San Francisco. They have information about, mostly about companies that are not good in the business.
The real big thing to understand here is that you need to know and be able to ask questions. So if you
Right.
want to, but we can say you should read through everything, ask as many questions as you need to ask. I'm sure, Patricia, if someone was interested with you, you would take as much time as it needed within
Absolutely.
to
Mm-hmm.
answer questions. The thing
Mm-hmm.
about the publishing world is that in the indie publishing sphere, and particularly, it's unregulated. There's no guideline that says you have to do X, Y, and Z and operate an X, Y,
Right.
Z to call yourself a publisher. So it's really incumbent on authors to become educated. And the sites that Patricia mentioned are wonderful, the Author Beware and the Ally
Mm-hmm.
site. Another thing that you can use as well is the Independent Book Publishers Association, IBPA, has done a lot of work around the framework of hybrid presses, and they have some great, if you Google IBPA hybrid press checklist, there's some great resources, information, questions, all of that. But most importantly, just don't sign a contract until you understand what you're signing. How many books would it be advisable to give away for promotional marketing purposes?
That is really a broad question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that it is a lot less expensive to give away ebooks. So you might think, as you're developing your marketing scheme, like, how can I make free ebooks available? Um, but I don't, I really can't answer that. The thing about print on demand, though, is that you can order 10 books today and 100 books tomorrow, and it will be the same price per book. So you don't have to determine upfront, like some authors come to me and say, well, I need 200 books, um, but they don't need them for 6 months. So you can sort of plan your needs. It takes about, I think, 2 weeks to get printed books, and you can oftentimes expedite the shipping. So, remember that with print on demand, you don't have to determine all of that stuff up front.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest advantages.
It
Laura,
is.
it depends on, I think, if you don't mind me adding to that just a little bit, I really think it depends on how many books you have published, what your platform looks like. And if it's your first book and you really,
Mm-hmm.
really want a lot of reviews when people go to your site, then you might want to give away more. If it's your fifth book and you've got a following, you don't need to give away hundreds of
Right.
copies of books. So,
Right. And you can also get review PDFs. So,
mhm,
like, we will make a review PDF with a cover on it if people want to send those around. There are people who don't like to read on screen, and there are people who would prefer to have it on screen. So
absolutely.
it's not like a cut and dry thing. Just think of all the ways you can get things out there and take advantage of them.
Absolutely. What do you think about selling your books at cash and carry at pop-up for cash and carry at pop-up events?
I think it's great.
Me too.
I had an author on last week or the week before who's going to farmers markets in San Diego. She said they're all over the place. She's got a children's book, and it just does very well there. So, there are all sorts of places you can do that. If you do that, you are buying books in advance and selling them, but you avoid the sales discount. So if you buy a book for $5 and sell it for, even discounted, say for $15, the retail price might be higher, you make a bigger royalty. But it's at the expense of buying books ahead of time.
Okay, I just dropped somebody asked for it again. It was dropped a little bit ago, but I just dropped information about Luminare Press, their website with their publishing packages, and also Patricia's email. So if you have specific questions about working with her company, pricing on all of these things, all of those types of things, please make sure you jot that down. And okay, one last question. Where does copywriting protection come in for fiction?
Oh my gosh, that is not a quick answer. Copyright is granted to you. Copyright law is fascinating. It is granted to you the minute you create an original work. We put a copyright page in all of our books. Anybody who's publishing needs to do that. You put a copyright page, assign the copyright to the author, and you can file for a formal copyright at copyright.gov. I think the fee is $65 to do that, but it's a fairly simple process, and they have a good explanation online about how to do that. But the thing I want you to remember is that you don't have to. We recommend it, but just by creating that work, you have copyright, and putting that copyright in the book puts readers on notice for that.
Well, thank you, Patricia. This was some really great information, really good in-depth information on some of the on the self-publishing plans. I hope everybody learned quite a bit from there. I'm going to drop this one more time just so that it's at the top of the notes so you can see the website and the contact information. Again, I really encourage you, if you have questions, if you're really thinking about working with a partner press, with a hybrid press, reach out, ask your questions. It can be such a great way to alleviate the pain and pressure of trying to figure out the entire landscape all on your own. And trust me, y'all, publishing is not an easy thing to understand. I've been doing this for over a decade. You've been in it for a long time, Patricia, and it's still like it changes. Things change. We get new tools. We get all of these things. It's a daily job just to keep up with the updates in publishing.
we have a series of videos to help people with uploading, people who are not our clients, but just things we make available. We have to redo them all now because everything just changed. Yeah.
Ingram Spark changed. I know all of the, I was in there with a client helping her do a book the other day, and I was like, oh, look, it's been a little while since I loaded a book to KDP. You can now put your book on pre-order, your print book on pre-order. So yes, we'll be doing all of ours.
It changes and honestly, it usually changes for the better.
Yes.
This is an evolving industry, and this is like it. I think that print on demand printing is like the biggest shift in the industry since movable type. And that's been like 500 years. We've been doing it one way. And now we have another way we can do things. So it's evolving. It's exciting. If you want to do it, get the help you need. I will be glad to talk to you. And I want to thank Alexa and everybody who came today. This has been really fun. And I hope I talk to some of you again.
Again, Patricia, thank you so much for supporting our
community.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful information, and reach out to them and check out Luminare Press. Maybe your perfect home for your book. All right. Thanks, everyone.
I hope so. Thanks, Alexa. Bye-bye.